Hi, and welcome to Horror Recapped. Today we'll be examining 2013's The Nurse. Beware, spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. The movie starts off with Abigail Russell, disguised as a working girl, accepting the advances of a married man in the club. They head onto the rooftop of the club, where Abigail gruesomely kills him by lacerating his femoral artery and pushing him over. The next day, at All Saints Hospital where Abigail works as a nurse, the induction ceremony for a new batch of nurses is being held. Ritually, all the nurses are assigned nursing students to mentor. The newbie that had been assigned to Abigail was a girl named Danny Rogers. Present to celebrate Danny's induction are Danny's mother, stepfather, Larry Cook, and Steve, her boyfriend from college who worked as a paramedic in the same hospital. Danny has a very rough and hectic first day due to resident Dr. Morris. Abigail describes him as a pig of a man who took pleasure in subjecting new nurses to intense pressure to break them in. He was also unpopular for constantly harassing the female nurses. Abigail, who had watched the entire thing happen, felt sorry for her, but is disappointed when Danny vents about Dr. Morris to her boyfriend, Steve, over a phone call rather than to her, prompting an exacerbated Danny to end the call early. Abigail immediately seizes this as an opportunity to talk to her. She assures her that Dr. Morris was generally mean to everyone, not specifically her. She also assures her that things would get better the sooner she got accustomed to the system of things in the hospital. After this, she invites Danny to get some drinks with her to help cheer her up. As if the night couldn't get any worse, they run into Danny's stepfather, Larry. He had lied to her and her mom that he was going on a business trip, when in reality, he was cheating on her mother. Abigail and Danny proceed to have a wild night at the club. The next day, she wakes up in Abigail's apartment with a hangover and vague memories of the shenanigans that had transpired the night before, them making out and having a three-way with some mysterious guy at the club. Abigail suggests that Danny should call in sick and spend the rest of the day with her. Danny, however, without hesitating, denies her offer, and it's obvious she regrets her choices. Abigail had taken pictures of everything that happened that night. After transferring them from her phone to her laptop, she proceeds to her next course of action for the day, visiting Larry at his workplace under the guise of booking her appointment. Larry is a professional therapist. She speaks to him about having an addiction to men that stemmed from her relationship with her dad while growing up. In response, Larry recommends signing up for addiction programs and treatment centers, and he gives her his contact. While receiving the note where Larry scribbled his number, Abigail caresses his hands and makes several subtle advances at him before leaving. Later, Danny sheds more light on the cause of her dispute with her boyfriend. The issues stemmed from her refusal to move into his apartment. She wasn't ready for this, due to the distress she harbored for her stepfather. So, she wanted to remain in their house to keep a protective eye on her mother. Abigail sympathetically offers her a spare key to her apartment, saying she was free to come over to her house whenever she was feeling devastated. This gesture comes off quite strange to Danny, but she accepts it anyway. While working on a patient together earlier, Abigail had sent Danny on an errand to fetch her some Vacuronium. Later, we see that Abigail used the meds on Larry. She tricks him by luring him into an alley at the pretense of wanting to screw, after which she injects him with the Vacuronium, paralyzing and getting him into an accident. Upon learning of her stepfather's demise, Danny goes to Abigail's apartment for consolation. When Abigail arrives, Danny lets her know how awful she feels and reveals her plan to finally move in with Steve because she couldn't stand being around all the grieving from her mother. Danny realizes Abigail might have a connection with the murder when she blurted out a detail about the car crash that Danny hadn't disclosed yet. She shares her suspicion with the detective in charge of investigating Larry's death, an FBI agent named John Rogan. Abigail, in her defense, paints a false perspective to John, saying Danny was mentally unstable and obsessively trying to get back with her ever since they went on the night out. Later, Danny overhears Rachel Adams, the hospital's new human resource employee, telling Abigail that she bore a striking resemblance to a girl she knew when she was much younger that had gotten sent to a mental institution. Who would have guessed? Abigail refutes this information, claiming it must have been a mere look-alike. She proceeds to invite her out for a night of drinking. Rachel, who is an upbeat woman, excitedly accepts the invitation. The duo tries to invite Danny to come along with them. However, she declines. Abigail plays mind games on Danny by mailing her pictures of them in bed and threatening to kill an intoxicated and unaware Rachel on a video call. In a panic, Danny calls the police. Detective John Rogan is highly dismissive of her claim. He feels Danny is still trying to get back at Abigail. This is due to Abigail's narrative and picture evidence that prove the night out had happened. Steve walks in on them as John questions Danny about the pictures. He's infuriated and immediately breaks up with Danny. Left with no other choice, Danny goes to Dr. Morris and gives a full explanation of everything, soliciting his help. Dr. Morris, however, instead of calling Abigail to order, tries to use this revelation to blackmail her into sleeping with him. Abigail tricks him by pretending to be on board with this bargain. They go to an empty surgery room where Abigail ties Dr. Morris to the bed and gruesomely tortures him before killing him by dismemberment. To top it off, she kills Rachel that same night. Meanwhile, Danny goes to the mental institution she had picked up from Abigail and Rachel's conversation to ask about Sarah. She learns that Sarah was a little girl who was brought into the mental institution after killing her serially cheating and physically abusive father. She didn't talk to anybody else, apart from one of the older women that worked in the institution, named Abigail Russell. Years later, Abigail died and Sarah ran away from the institution, never returning. Danny now realizes the full truth about Abigail. She tries to warn Rachel about this. Abigail, however, calls to inform that she had killed Rachel and that the same fate awaited Steve later in the evening. Danny rushes to the hospital to confront Abigail. As they fight, other members of the staff try to intervene, only for Abigail to start a killing spree. Steve shows up and joins Danny in chasing Abigail. They chase her into a surgery theater, but she locks herself inside quickly enough before Steve can gain entrance by breaking the glass door with a stool. Abigail kills all the patients and doctors in the theater. She pretends to be one of the unconscious patients, and once Steve and Danny are close to her, she stabs Steve in the neck, then runs off while Danny is trying to help him. While escaping, she runs into Detective John Rogan, who is now aware of everything and her real identity. He pulls out a weapon and tries to arrest her. Abigail puts her hands up, but starts screaming instead, pretending she was being robbed. Her overprotective and friendly neighbor, Jared, knocks John Rogan out with a bat, killing him. In the final scene, a new human relations recruit is seen arriving at a different hospital. She goes by the name Rachel Owens. That's going to wrap up this recap. We hope you've enjoyed it. If so, please click the subscribe button with notifications turned on so you don't miss a single video.